If you're an indie artist who hasn't released music yet, or if you already chose a distributor because you wanted to get your music out quickly and you figured you'd deal with the details later, well, there's a few contract terms that you almost certainly didn't understand when you clicked on agree. Those same terms decide who controls your music, how difficult that it is to leave, and whether certain opportunities ever make it to you in the first place. And when artists finally understand how these clauses actually work, a lot of them ask the same question, which is, did I just make a huge mistake? Most artists miss these details not because they're careless, but because the language feels routine. The sign-up process is fast and the risks aren't explained in plain terms. So I want to slow this down and walk through the parts of these arguments that tend to matter later when momentum, money, or leverage are already involved. Quick note, before we go further, I'm not a lawyer and this is not legal advice. I'm translating common contract language into plain English the best way that I can so you can recognize pressure points before they recognize you. And these are things that I've learned along the way. Here's the important part to keep in mind as we go. At least one of the things that we're about to talk about will matter to you much more than the others, and most artists don't realize which one until it's already costing them time, money, or opportunities. And later in this video, I'll explain the clause that can quietly erase years of momentum, even when nothing seems wrong on the surface. And a lot of these problems don't show up at the beginning. That's the pattern. They show up later. And one of the earliest places that this starts is ownership of masters. An artist released their first EP independently and feels good about doing things the right way, and a couple of years later, one track starts to pick up a new life. A filmmaker reaches out about licensing the song, and the artist says yes immediately. Then they learn that while they technically own the recording, the distributor controls the master through an exclusive license. Approval takes time. The fee changes, the filmmaker has a deadline, and they move on. And the artist didn't lose ownership on paper, they lost control when it mattered. Best case, you fully own and control your masters, like with distributors that clearly stay non-exclusive around master ownership. I'm thinking DistroKid or SoundOn. And worst case, platforms like ONErpm or Horus structure exclusive master control that slows or blocks opportunities later. Another quiet risk lives in the scope of rights that you grant. A producer, for example, opts into every optional service while uploading a release. Content ID, social monetization, sync administration. It feels efficient. One dashboard, no loose ends. And later, a brand wants to license a track. Legal asks who controls YouTube and social usage, and the answer isn't clear. The rights are split across systems the producer barely remembers agreeing to. The brand moves on, and nothing felt like a hard decision at the time. The consequences only appeared when someone else needed clarity. Best case, distributors like AWAL or SoundCloud for artists keep distribution clean and separate from extra rights unless you deliberately choose otherwise. Worst case, platforms like ONErpm or opt-in services from Ditto can create overlapping controls that quietly kill deals. And then there's exclusivity, which almost never hurts when nothing is happening. An artist signs an exclusive distribution deal early because it feels professional. Everything works fine. And then a track gains traction from a short-form video, for example. Audience interest accelerates. Another distributor reaches out with better tools and relationships. The artist can't move the track because they're locked in, and by the time they can switch, the moment has totally passed. Nothing went wrong with the music. The agreement just moved slower than the audience did. Best case, non-exclusive models like DistroKid or TuneCore let you pivot when conditions change. In worst case, exclusive structures from ONErpm or Symphonic or Horus can freeze you at the exact moment that flexibility matters. Term length and renewal quietly multiply this problem. An artist signs a multi-year agreement, for example, because the platform feels stable, and years later they want to restructure their catalog and brand. While preparing, they realize the agreement auto-renewed just weeks earlier, and they're locked in again, not because they committed to the future, but because they forgot the past. Best case, short rolling terms like AWAL's third-day structure keep exits very clean. In worst case, long initial terms with auto-renewals, common in platforms like ONErpm or older Symphonic agreements, can fossilize early decisions. And what happens when you leave matters just as much. An artist's subscription lapses after a card expires, Their catalog is removed, playlists drop, discovery stalls, payments are fixed quickly, but momentum doesn't return the same way. No malice, no mistake, just a system doing what it was designed to do. Best case, CD Baby or AWAL keep catalog stable and removals intentional, and worst case, subscription models like DistroKid and TuneCore treat payment lapses as grounds for takedown. Money brings its own traps. An artist watches their numbers climb steadily, and the distributor says you keep your royalties, and plans are made around future income. Payouts arrive lighter than expected. Social performance doesn't match revenue. And eventually the artist learns that different revenue types carry different splits and deductions. No one lied. The math was just never what the artist had pictured. Best case, platforms like SoundCloud for artists or AWAL state cuts clearly and simply. Worst case, complex split structures from ONErpm, Symphonic, SoundOn after year one, RouteNote free, or LANDR can make income hard to predict. Timing matters as much as totals do. A songwriter earns modest but steady income, and their balance rises under a payout threshold. Studio time is booked anyway. Bills don't wait. And when a payout finally lands, it pays for the past and not for the future. Best case, low thresholds like SoundCloud for artists keep cash moving. In the worst case, higher thresholds like Symphonic can delay access to money when it's actually needed. Now we're at the issue that most artists only think about once. An artist switches distributors. Same songs, same artwork, streams flatten, playlists drop completely. New ISRCs were issued during migration, and the music didn't change, but its identity did. Best case, AWAL explicitly preserves ISRC stats and history. Worst case, exclusive or inflexible platforms like ONErpm, Symphonic, or Horus can make mobility legally or technically painful. Metadata and takedowns don't need long stories, but they matter. If someone else can edit metadata at their discretion, royalties can quietly reroute. And if takedowns move slowly, damage compounds. Best case, these systems stay invisible and responsive. Worst case, small administrative clauses create long-term friction. And if any of this feels uncomfortable, that's a good sign. It means that you're seeing the decision clearly. You don't need perfect contracts, you need understood contracts. And if this helped, the next step isn't guessing better, it's learning how to evaluate distributors based on terms and not just marketing. And that's where better decisions actually get made.